Saturday Morning Chats, hosted by author, life coach, and mystic Tonya Lampley.
Hi, friends, and welcome back. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the laws of the universe. And if you aren't familiar with the laws of the universe, you may want to just do a quick Google search and kind of get yourself familiar with what those laws are. There's seven main ones. I've seen 11. There could even possibly be more than that. But basically, there are certain laws that govern the universe. Most people are familiar with the law of gravity, but there are other laws that are less concrete, I'm going to say, or less tangible, like the law of attraction. If you are somewhat familiar with the laws of the universe, that's the one that you probably hear the most about. Most people, or I'm not going to say most people, but a lot of people know about the law of attraction, and everybody's trying to use it and raise their vibration so they can manifest stuff. But there are others, and you want to know about them. You want to know what they are. And so today I'm going to be talking about just one of them, and that is the law of polarity, or some people refer to it as the law of opposites. Well, what does that mean? So, we live in a universe. It's very scientific in nature when you really think about it. I think sometimes we lose sight of that, but there is a certain scientific theme that underlies almost everything that happens in the universe. When you think about our physical bodies, it is a chemical factory. At any given second, there are hundreds of chemical processes that are going on in our bodies that make us who we are. And I think we sometimes lose track of that. When we were little kids, we learned about the planets up in the sky and the sun and how the earth rotates on its axis. But for everyday life, we just kind of go along and that stuff just fades into the background. And we really don't think that much about the fact that there's a lot of science going on here. And it really is one of the drivers of life as we know it. So let's set that aside for a second. And let's talk about the law of polarity, or the law of opposites. We know up, down, we know good, bad, we know back, forth. The law of polarity really just states that for every condition, there is an opposite of that condition, and that conditions are really just a continuum. Let me explain that. When you think about the concept of love, the opposite of that is hate. And so the law of polarity explains that they are really just either two sides of the same coin, or they are a continuum. Let's say you're at the bottom down in hate. That's a lower level vibration, a lower energy. And you would move up the scale to, maybe you can go from hate to dislike. And then maybe you can go from dislike to tolerate. And maybe you can go from tolerate to like. And then maybe you can go from like to love. And so the law of polarity explains that conditions are just opposites of one another, or they are on a continuum. And what is my point to all of this? I think that sometimes when we're going through life, we lose sight of this kind of basic understanding, and we start to personalize certain things, and we kind of get caught up or get defeated by some of these things that are simply just scientific and principle and law. And when you think of things in terms of that, you can kind of get to a place where You can do what I call right sizing, and that means that you don't let it take you kind of off your equilibrium, or you don't blow things out of proportion, or you don't get really upset. You're able to kind of maintain your balance when you can step back and look at some of these things from the perspective of this is just what life is. There is no personal conspiracy against me. When I was a young girl, I come from a Christian discipline. I'm still Christian, but we call them the saints. That was the older Christians. They would say the devil is busy today. Whenever something bad was happening, they would say the devil is busy today. And if you want to call it evil, that's fine. Some people say good and bad. Some people say there's good and there's evil. But I really want you to understand that you can't have one thing without the other. And so when you can step back and see it from that perspective, there is no devil that's chasing us, that's trying to ruin us per se. Now we can get deep into the nuances of this conversation. I don't think it's necessary. What I want you to do is to be able to just move throughout your life and just say, meh, this is just the law of polarity at work. In order for me to know what good is, there has to be a bad. In order for me to know what happy is, there has to be the concept of sadness. And so when you can step back and look at life from that perspective, that negative things are going to happen simply because we live in an environment that is based on one of these laws, and that is the law of polarity. I tell you, for me, it really helped me kind of get a better understanding or a better perspective when things aren't going well for me, right? Instead of me getting caught up and all the forces are against me and I can't do this and I can't do that, I simply step back and say, you know what? This is just what it is. And we live in an environment where there are negative things, and those negative things are here because there is the law of polarity, but also so that we can learn and become more. So when I can kind of detach and not be so caught up in my feelings about some of this stuff, life tends to go better for me. And I'm not going to say I've mastered this and I do it at every second and all the time. Sometimes things happen and they do really suck. And sometimes your emotions do get tied up in it. But one thing I've trained myself to do is after I give myself my moment, I'm going to step back and I'm going to start seeing things from the much broader perspective. This is just what life is. Everything is not always going to be good, because think about it like this. If we only knew things as good, how boring would life be? You don't have anything to compare it to. If you were born and everything just always went your way, it would be very vanilla and very bland, right? You can't know happiness, you can't know pure joy unless you know the absence of pure joy. And so when God created his universe, his genius, brilliant, and I don't mean to be disrespectful because he is beyond these common words that I'm using, but when he planned it out, when he created it, it all had purpose, it all had meaning, it all works extremely well for us. And I think we forget that. We get caught up in the moment. Why is this happening to me? I can't do this and da 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 da. Instead of just stepping back and saying, you know what? This is the way God created the universe, but he has given me power over it, right? I can control my vibration, and that gives me some mastery over the law of polarity. Now, you're not going to trump all law, because law is law. Like, if you jump off of a building, you can raise your vibration as high as you want to on the way down, but splat is just not going to end very well for you. But let's move away from the extremes. Just the everyday things that kind of happen in our lives. You do have the ability to affect that, and you do that by raising your vibration, right? When you are happy, when you are hopeful, when you are diligent, when you are earnest, when you are kind, when you are benevolent, when you are loving, you have the ability to affect negative circumstances. trying to say this in a way that just really makes sense. The higher your vibration, the more control you're going to have over your life experience. I'm just going to say it like that. And that includes the law of polarity. You're not going to trump it completely. I don't want to put that out there because that would be inaccurate. But you do have the power to lessen their effect on you by raising your vibration, by living a spiritual life, by being spiritually disciplined. You have power and you have control over your life experience, and you don't have to be at the bottom, tied up and struggling with all these kinds of things. So, I wanted to come talk to you about that, give you a little bit of hope today, give you an understanding that life is what it is, and it's very scientific. And to the extent that we understand that, and to the extent that we not only recognize what the laws are, but learn how to navigate the world that is based on these laws, you're just going to find your life experience getting better and better. I hope that helps. If you have questions, reach out to me. Let me know. I can do a follow up. But hey, the next time you're having a rough go of it, just simply step back and say, you know what? This is simply, we live in a world where there is opposites. And in order for me to know good, I have to know what bad is. And this is all just a part of it. I ain't got to fall apart. I can just be okay with it. I can figure out what I need to do to get beyond this moment, and I can just keep